Well, hello. This is part two of the best practices for Team One about the Nike supply chain for location strategies. Our first take got cut off, so we are repeating the last two slides. We left off at the interview around the Nike strategy around supply chain best practices, and as I mentioned, for speed and location strategy. We interviewed Andrew Smith from Nike. He's a manager of the Global Express Lane Operations, sometimes referred to as GEL. Andrew has over 10 years experience in supply chains from across the supply chain world, from its small companies. So worked in inventory through DC, through supply chain demand. So he has a great visibility to supply chain operations. So the background is Nike has created a specific new supply chain, and it's referred to as GEL, the Global Express Lane. And one of their projects to kick it off is the footwear production in Guadalajara, Mexico. And this Mexico production is through a partnership with Flex that was mentioned previously by Romana. So we kicked it off by asking Andrew about what were some of the best known methods or practices in supply chain and logistics strategy that maybe Nike pulled from the industry. His thoughts were that Nike looks to be an industry leader. They help set new standards. Often he likes to think of it as there's really nobody as a competitor to Nike who's working at this scale, billions of shoes from across the globe. So there really is no true standard to pull from, but they do set their own standards in terms of like the new supply chain mantra is REF, reliable, efficient, and flexible. And as they move to Mexico and closer to the customer through the mega markets, they need to kind of be really looking to the customer's point of view. So for the mega markets, this is something we've spoken to by Nike, by Mark Parker. And mega markets are the 12 mega cities that Nike is focusing on, where our customer base will be growing the most. So looking to create local manufacturing capabilities to serve those markets. In the Guadalajara, Mexico experiment with Flex is serving the US, LA and New York City being the two mega markets within the United States. But as we set up these mega markets and these closer to strategy production, especially for Mexico, the thing to keep in mind is 85% of the material source base is still in Asia at this point. So they are evaluating approaches to reduce the lead time for getting the material over from Asia. So the little graphic to the right shows that the current supply chain for Nike has 10 supply chains, I believe. So this is just the new one. So currently the source base and manufacturing are all located in Asia, and it's quite close. So those steps happen quite quickly. But then those gray bars are the transit time until we get to the customer. So as I mentioned earlier in the Zara slide, this can be up to 45 days of transportation on the ship. With the express lane strategy, while the source base is still in Asia, those gray lines are getting the source base over to Guadalajara to get the manufacturing and then to the customer. Manufacturing the customer in this case is 2 days. So we have the kind of a postponement effect by getting the product to the customer in its customized state. Now, getting those 3 bars from source base to manufacturing, I've talked about we're evaluating approaching to reduce those lead times. There's some different strategies that they're looking at. One of them is looking at the BOMs, the bill of materials, and determining what the weakest link is. If material X has a 45-day lead time, they're looking to focus on how to maybe pre-purchase some of material X or other ways to shorten that lead time. Other strategies are to create a more optimized BOM, or bill of materials, again, and working with designers and developers to pick materials that can have a lead time of 21 days or less. There's other gray strategies on the apparel side that are being worked on as well. So we talked a little bit about what elements does the Nike senior management want to continue or discontinue when they look at evolving this new supply chain. In general, Andrew spoke about experimenting and failing fast, and that was something that was supported heavily by Nike management and leadership. And when they experiment and they fail fast or hopefully succeed fast as well, in these cases, it's actually a very analytical process. There's a hypothesis, there's data gathering, there's lessons learned, and it's not a wasteful thing. It's really, everything has really a plan of attack when they go after it. The other thing that he mentioned was more of his, Andrew's kind of point of view, or his philosophy was to beg forgiveness versus asking questions. So this is something that kind of speaks to the Zara speed of communication. And sometimes things get caught up in emails and different dialogues going back and forth, trying to make decisions. Sometimes maybe it's okay to make a decision and move quickly just so things don't get stuck on a little bit of a do loop. This is something actually I've heard mentioned by other Nike leadership as well. It is definitely something that is recognized, that the whole human element of the processes does slow things down. When we talked to Andrew, we had a question around, since reducing lead times is the biggest driver to changing to the strategy for nearshoring, what are the key elements that are being considered in this nearshoring strategy? Very quickly, he said automation. He said automation was key to this success. He said the Flex partnership was also the driver to the automation success. Flex was primarily electronics OEM partner up until the point with the shoe project with Nike. And Nike kind of took a moonshot, as Andrew said, and they looked to have the best partner in the field, and Flex filled that void. They also got the automation part of the production process up and running for us. The other thing that's a key element is the localization of the materials ecosystem. So already mentioned 85% of the material source base is in Asia. Getting those capabilities and those locations close to the finished good production would be a key driver to the supply chain. We finally asked Andrew about, were there any best practices leveraged specifically from other companies? And we asked about Zara in this case as known to be a kind of a best in field for supply chains. He said not really. He went back to the scale as well, because there isn't a lot to pull from in terms of apparel and footwear production at this scale. But he wanted to highlight that Nike doesn't need to be fast on everything. He used, for example, the Air Force One shoe, which is over 30 years of data. And when you have 30 years of data to pull from, you don't always have to be fast. It's more of a replenishment game than predicting what the customer wants. He said the fast part was the seasonal colorways and the trends. He also wanted to highlight that since Nike does not leverage air freight as a strategy for the vast majority of our stuff, there's very, very few exceptions to that. That's how Zara really kind of catapults their speed. Is a fair bit of it is the air freight strategy. So in conclusion, Nike and other sportswear companies have built a manufacturing and distribution infrastructure around an Asian source base. This has been since the 70s and the 80s, and it's what's driven costs down. It's got some great quality, as with some great partners overseas that Romana talked about as well. So the new nearshoring trends are being driven by opportunities to speed up the supply chain. Transportation globally from an Asia manufacturing site is inherently slow when you're by ship, that 45 days that we mentioned. But it's allowing also for more product innovation. Being closer to the manufacturer allows for this innovation process. Partnerships with Flex give this opportunity to reach the customized products within a short time to the customers. Changes with the TPP, namely the US's decision currently to not move forward with it, and potentially change with the NAFTA, it could have forced US companies to rethink their supply chain strategies around nearshoring, particularly for Nike and Flex and the Guadalajara plant. It doesn't seem that NAFTA is actually a driver at the moment, since 85% of the source base is still overseas. They're probably not receiving many of the NAFTA benefits at this point. Although definitely something to consider for the future. And then since there's already a high tariff imposed on shoes, taxes may not do too much damage compared to other companies. So the best practices from Zara are extremely interesting, but they did kind of prove out to be very applicable to the Nike business model, with that noted exception of communication, quick communication, fast communication. Nike's Global Express Lane, or GEL, will facilitate the supply chain speed using a localization or nearshoring strategy to the United States, and particularly with Guadalajara is the initial pilot production site. There are also production facilities happening in Asia with Singapore and Hong Kong and Tokyo, with the source base and the manufacturing base already over in Asia. These sites already have a leg up on their express lanes, and Europe is next in line. So the Global Express Lane will enable the Nike consumer direct offense in the megacity strategy, and it will deliver products faster to customers. Thank you. This is Team 1.